Hey, hi, and hello. It's Capital 10 here, and today we're going to talk about Batman Arkham City, one of my favorite games. I may be about 11 years too late to the punch, but I wasn't on YouTube back then, so we're doing this now. Although Asylum revolutionized the business of superhero video games, City somehow built further upon its foundation, and the biggest upscale in my opinion were the boss fights, a trend they unfortunately didn't follow through with the next sequel. Now, there are multiple videos on this platform already that discuss the strengths and weaknesses of each and every boss in the series, and mild spoilers for those videos, go watch them first, they're fantastic. But one boss in particular consistently rates highly in these types of lists. That boss, as I'm sure you can tell from the title of this video, is Mr. Freeze. And I wholeheartedly agree. He's my favorite boss fight in the series by far. But why exactly? Well, as previously stated, this topic has been covered before by other channels, but I find that most of them are more heavily focused on the fight itself. Now that makes sense, it's a boss battle, so the battle rightfully takes precedent, right? But what I find is that there's so much more that's special to this boss that falls by the wayside in these analyses. So, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring to discuss why this encounter is so revered in my eyes, from the build-up of the fight itself, and the implications of the fight moving forward. Oh, and spoilers moving forward from here on out for both Asylum and City. So, to refresh everyone's memory of the plot of Arkham City, or to catch you up to speed if you haven't played it at all, in which case, why are you watching this? Batman has been poisoned by the Joker, who's also sick, so they both need to find a cure. The only lead he has is that Joker was working with Mr. Freeze to have the cure formulated. This is our first reference to the Frosty Menace outside of some chatter from Joker's henchmen, and it sets the stage for building up his relevance in the overall plot. The next step in the progression of the game is to find where Mr. Freeze is holed up in Arkham City. You do this by using a heat sensor to track the coldest area in the prison. It's a great excuse for exploration that you get a real sense for the scope of the game world as you search high and low for the frozen nightmare of a world that awaits you. Or if you've played the game before, you can just go over to the GCPD building because that's where you're heading. Like I said, spoilers ahoy. Now, Freeze isn't in the GCPD. Sad noises. However, our time here isn't wasted. To those unaware, this is the boss arena for the Freeze fight, but it happens later in the game. Right now, a group of Penguin's thugs are controlling the room. What this speed bump affords us, however, is a practice run. Even from the way we have to enter the room, being above the area looking down, allots the player information about all the different possibilities for taking down opponents. Now, of course, you could simply snake around the room performing silent takedowns from behind all the enemies like I did, but if you're creative, the game gives you lots of toys to play around with, like breakable walls to explode or grates in the floor to ambush passerby. The developers went above and beyond to provide ample variety in the gameplay for this section so that they could acclimate you to thinking with an open mind. It preps you beautifully for the boss fight further down the line. Now, back to the plot. Mr. Freeze has been kidnapped by Penguin. That means we'll have to find our way into the museum where they're holed up. This admittedly is a knock against the game as it sullies the strength of Mr. Freeze. Penguin tells Batman that it took quite a lot of his henchmen to subdue their target, but at the end of the day, they're still just henchmen. Batman tears through crowds of them immediately after hearing this, so it tampers down the expectations of our encounter. Also, on that note, and to skip ahead a bit, meeting Freeze for the first time is underwhelming because he's outside of his suit and being tortured in his weakened state. Plot-wise, it makes sense, but it takes away some of the intimidation factor. However, the intimidation factor gets cranked up by breaking into the flooded area of the museum. Firstly, it's sealed off by a giant ice wall that you have to blow up to enter. And as soon as you enter, you're blasted by Penguin using Freeze's ice cannon, and afterwards he freezes a fleeing cop with ease. Now let's get one thing straight. Penguin is pathetic. He's a bitter old man with no abilities or potential for menace aside from his umbrella gun, which doesn't elevate him any higher than the armed thugs spread across the city. Early in the game, he goes down in one punch for crying out loud. But when he gets that cannon, his threat level goes through the roof. I know I joked about a frozen nightmare world earlier, but here, Penguin has single-handedly turned that into a reality. Furthermore, if you attempt to face down Penguin early, he's absolutely untouchable as he'll gun you down with ease while protecting himself with a force field. You learn very quickly to fear him in his current state. So, why am I harping on about Penguin in a video about Freeze being the best boss in the game? Well, it's because of how this builds up the inevitable encounter. Think about it this way. If Penguin has evolved to such a palpable threat by using one piece of equipment from Freeze's arsenal, how terrifying must Freeze be when he's fully equipped? We even visit the suit as a means to find the disarming mechanism for the cannon, and it certainly meets the expectations of a daunting presence. Once Freeze gets his hands on the suit, you just know he'll be the most intimidating person in the room. To further enunciate the power scaling with Freeze's technology, once Batman jams the cannon, Penguin goes back to being nearly useless. He hides behind Solomon Grundy during the subsequent boss battle, and even with a rocket launcher, he goes down so easily. The comparisons of Penguin before and after disrupting the cannon is astounding, and inadvertently demonstrates how afraid you should be of Freeze's genius. Speaking of him, you next see Freeze in his suit in the next scene, and yeah, he fits the bill for intimidating alright. Granted, it loses some shock value when you think about him being Tony Stark if the Iron Man prototype was made out of a slushy machine, but that's besides the point. We spend the next part of the game chasing down the League of Assassins and Ra's al Ghul for his immortal blood, which is good but not the focus of the video, so we're moving on. I will say that the poison nearly kills Batman here, but is subdued by the demon trials, which does lower the stakes on finding the cure, at least for the time span of the rest of the game, but ridding our hero of the toxin is still a priority of the plot, so we're still being guided by the initial goal of making it back to Freeze. Therefore, it's still in the back of the player's mind even while sidetracked underneath Arkham. Now, moving forward, we get the blood back to Freeze and, surprise, surprise, he betrays us. He does so because the Clown Prince of Crime is holding his wife hostage for the cure, which will come up in a second. Now, as I've stated, plenty of other YouTubers have discussed this portion of the topic already, so I'll keep this section brief. If you're unfamiliar with the fight, you're tasked with performing a takedown of Mr. Freeze a handful of times. However, it isn't as simple as other bosses where you wait for a pattern and strike with the same move to damage him. You see, at the start of the fight, you can do essentially anything to harm him, but after you do so, he'll adjust either himself or the arena itself to ensure that your last method of attack won't work a second time. For example, if you perform a silent takedown from behind, he'll activate back thrusters on his suit so you can't jump him like that again. Therefore, you have to come up with a variety of tactics to finish off your foe. That may seem intimidating, and it is. But remember that the game has funneled you into this area before to teach you about the various stunts you can pull off in it. The developers have primed you for this fight, and you're rewarded for having experimented previously and retaining that knowledge. But that's not all. Mr. Freeze will track you down. You see, most of the boss fights in this series focus on the combat aspect of the games. And don't get me wrong, the combat in the series is fantastic. The ebb and flow of fists to the unheard rhythm mesmerizes you as you continue your journey. Whether you're putting bat knuckles to henchmen's skulls or flinging and firing gadgets every which way at rampaging titans and supervillains, it's certainly rewarding to make your mark on the baddies. But with a majority of boss encounters centered around a similar mechanic, they can start to feel a tad samey, sort of blending in together. It's a shame because the series has two shining systems implemented into the gameplay, the combat system and the stealth mechanics. Unfortunately, the latter seems to get shafted when the developers made boss battles, except for Freeze. The battle starts with Batman behind a wall, signifying to the player that this will be a different approach than usual. Plus, Barbara reminds you that you've been in this situation before, and that you need to be stealthy. Unless the player ignores the suggestion and charges the opponent, at which point they'll realize the head-on approach is fruitless. Just like it was demonstrated with Penguin, Freeze's ice cannon will blow you away. Instead, they'll need to sneak around the arena like other Predator sections. And as previously stated, Mr. Freeze follows your every move. It isn't like the Two-Face confrontation with Catwoman later, where you can just hang out in the corner assessing the situation. No, Freeze has a heat sensor to follow your signature around the room, so you're constantly on the move. This, along with adding tension to the scenario, allows us yet another opportunity to get a better understanding of the traps around the room. It's more rewarding if you've previously analyzed your surroundings during the thug encounter, but this does act as a safe backup protocol for those who may have missed the relevance of the earlier mission. So just in case you didn't retain what resources are available to you, you can still make laps around the arena surveying the landscape until you feel comfortable enough turning the tables on Mr. Roboto. Okay, now that we're done with that section, following the fight, Batman bashes Freeze's head in a good number of times until he briefly turns into Joker. There are multiple interpretations for this moment, but it's not exactly the focus of this video, so we'll move on. After being bested, Freeze essentially admits defeat as he stops retaliating. Batman then goes to retrieve the cure only to find that it's already been stolen by the clown, so now it's time to infiltrate his lair at the steel mill. This essentially is the end of Freeze's relevance to the story. Only, not quite. You see, Freeze is a more sympathetic villain than most of Batman's rogue gallery, at least in the Arkham-Verse. He commits crimes, yes, but it's all in favor of keeping his wife Nora safe while searching for a cure for her life-threatening disease. He'd do anything for her, and the whole reason he even considered working with the demented Joker was that his wife was the madman's prisoner. After the Titan's cure is stolen, he realizes that he's been double-crossed and won't be getting his wife back. Therefore, his only hope of locating her is with Batman's assistance. This leads to two developments. First, you're gifted a new gadget, and second, you're given a new side quest. Now, Batman constantly upgrades his arsenal throughout these games. Most of the time, however, it's tied to circumstances occurring in the plot. For example, you get the remote electrical charge by swiping tech from the steel mill in response to Joker's thugs sealing a door shut. It's usually just a story beat without much fanfare. However, in this instance, you get the freeze grenades as a direct consequence of beating the specific boss. I absolutely love the idea of growing stronger as a reward for beating a boss. It's a dopamine rush directly paralleling your actions. We'll call it the Mega Man effect. Coined Capital 10 2022. The only other time this happens is following the Twin Titan battle in Asylum and the aforementioned Solomon Grundy / Penguin fight. However, in these instances, both of your gadgets, which coincidentally happen to be the same line launcher, are delivered via Batman's accomplices, Alfred and Robin respectively. So it depreciates the value of receiving the upgrade at that moment, because it feels as though it could have happened at any time and is only pertinent to receive then and there, once again due to plot convenience. Also, the Mega Man effect could have happened in Origins, but I haven't actually played that one yet. And it could have happened in Night, but I don't care to remember that much about that game, so leave it in the comments if they also handle character progression correctly. As previously said, the second development is the side quest. Usually when bosses are defeated in this series, they go away. After all, Batman knows how to make people stay down. For example, Penguin doesn't come back following the debacle in the museum. Hugo Strange and Joker both die, so they won't make returns. Scarecrow's fear gas. And Ra's al Ghul only gets a cutscene toward the end of the game following his vanquishing, which makes sense because, he's immortal. Two-Face is an exception, but that's post-game content and DLC locked on the original release. Mr. Freeze, on the other hand, continues to contribute to the main game by asking you to save Nora. Not only does he provide you with an amazing boss fight, but he provides you with additional content once you've taken him out and converted him to your side. By the way, do you know how to find Nora? It's by using freeze grenades. Bonus points! And once you've found her and report back to Freeze, he'll leave the GCPD and go to her, causing a change in the map as he puts down a giant ice bridge between his and her locations. It's wild to see, trust me. So there's my case. Arkham City is chock full of fantastic content, but the cherry on top is absolutely Victor Freeze. Almost nothing about him disappoints. His build-up both in character, weaponry, and arena are masterfully handled. The boss fight is without a doubt the best that this series, or what I've played of it, has to offer in that it incorporates an underused mechanic to full effect while offering a unique encounter as opposed to all the other pattern-based fights. The aftermath of the fight leads directly to Batman powering up while adding even more content to the game in the process. It all just culminates so well to form the best boss fight that Batman has ever seen. And that's all from me this time. If you liked what I talked about, then consider leaving a like on the video, and if you want to continue the discussion, leave a comment of your thoughts about the subject, but please be respectful. Did you like what I had to say or how I said it? Why not subscribe? If you didn't like it, thanks for hearing me out this long anyway. This is Capital 10 signing off. See y'all some other time.